we're just going to give everybody a few more minutes to log in. So we'll resume shortly.
Thanks all for joining. I'll get started at about 10:03, Elise.
That works for me.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. I think we're good to go ahead and get started, yeah.
All right, I'll just do a quick intro and then I'll hand it over. Well, once again, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. In case you're not sure who I am, my name's Elise Fry, and I'm the Director of the Health Plan Options Department here at URL Insurance Group. Please reach out to my team if you have any questions or need assistance with group or under 65 insurance. Now that we have that out of the way, I'm always excited to have Rocco back here. He's a frequent flyer in our webinar series. But I'm excited to have him do some disability training, and I hope you find it valuable. So I'm going to hand it over to him to let him properly introduce himself.
Thank you, Elise. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Rocco. I'm with Mutual of Omaha. Very excited to go through this presentation. I was just mentioning to Elise, we hold a lot of these courses to go through some CE credit training, or CE courses rather, and I'm sort of restricted and confined by what is required to be gone over in those presentations. This one, we can really focus on some things that we've found in the marketplace to be extremely important and can really help you being a consultant with your clients, with these employers, with HR managers, with CFOs and CEOs, when you're meeting with them and sitting down with them to talk about your recommendations and to talk about the proposals that you have from different carriers, and really the impact that the differences between those carriers, specifically with disability, actually has on the claimant. That's the biggest focus of what we do. It's easy to get sort of caught up in all of the other things that we have going on. But ultimately, the goal of what it is that we do is to help somebody in a time when they need that help. For disability, it's when they're hurt or they're sick and they can't work and they need the money the most. There are some really big differences between provisions, carriers, and contracts that have a major impact on that claimant. And honestly, I could talk about disability for 10 hours. I am not going to do that. So for this presentation, I have narrowed it down to 3 major concepts that we're at least going to start with. And hopefully, like Elise mentioned, this is kind of a webinar series. Hopefully you do find it beneficial, and maybe we set up another meeting in the future to go over part 2 and so on. So I'm going to start out with just giving an introduction, sort of an overview about Mutual of Omaha. And then I'm going to jump into those 3 key components for disability training. All right. So we are located in Conshohocken. Our Philadelphia office is in Conshohocken. Mike Butler is my manager and mentor. He has grown our office from $6 million to $10 million over the last 10 years. We are the fastest growing ancillary carrier, and I personally partner with brokers in the central and eastern Pennsylvania area. And I partner with brokers for all ancillary benefits. So everything next to medical insurance. So that's life, disability, both short and long term, dental vision, accident, critical illness, hospital indemnity, and absence management. Our goal is to be the easiest carrier to do business with. All of our contracts, employee paid or employer paid, are the same exact contracts. Everything is on one bill for the client. The industries that we work in are agnostic. I mean, we are competitive across the board. We're very competitive with school districts, manufacturers, et cetera. And I work with groups of all sizes. So there's not a different rep for different group sizes. This says 2 to 100,000. I usually say 2 to a million. Voluntary or employee paid benefits come in for groups with more than 10 eligible. And our sweet spot, sort of our niche, is around that 25 to 500 life size group. So a lot of folks are familiar with Mutual of Omaha as a life and disability carrier, which is great. It is something we do really well. We also do dental very well. Not a lot of folks are aware of that, simply because when my boss, Mike Butler, grew our office from 6 million to 100 million over the last 10 years, he didn't really need to write any dental to do that, and didn't really talk about it a lot in these territories in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey. We are a major dental player nationwide, but in this territory specifically, we have good rates, we have a good network, but providers and employers just aren't necessarily aware of our name as a dental carrier. So it's really the name recognition that prevents us from writing as much dental as we really could. But this slide here is just to give you an overview that we have as much flexibility as any of the other carriers out there, meaning we can do a MAC out of network, 90th UCR, 95th UCR, 99th. We have the ability to do a lifetime deductible on dental. Usually we'll see a $50 deductible for employee and then $150 for family. We can do a $100 lifetime. Once that's satisfied, it's not going to reset the next year. That's not something that I'm really seeing any other carriers doing. And we also don't have a missing tooth provision, which a lot of other major players in the market do. Again, this is just a quick overview on Mutual of Omaha, and then I'll get into the main disability product training. But another thing that we do great is implementation. That's one of the items that a lot of employers and HR managers especially might be hesitant with when they are thinking of transitioning to a new carrier and all of the work that's going to come along with that. We make that process as easy as possible. When we get the green light that a group wants to move forward, we'll set up a 30-minute to 45-minute welcome call or implementation call. We'll go through all the paperwork together. We will actually fill everything out on our end for the client. So after that quick call, we can just send updated paperwork that only requires signatures. Makes it really easy. Everybody's on the same page. All questions are answered. And as you can imagine, that really helps mitigate the amount of fires that come up 6 months down the road, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, whatever it might be. And then finally, we are a voluntary powerhouse. I mean, voluntary benefits, employee paid benefits are one of the engines to our success. We have a ton of resources and capabilities for streamlining a really easy experience for HR and the employees, from in-person or virtual or both 10-minute presentations. We can create an app that can be shared with employees that has access to all of their benefit summaries, their enrollment platform if they're enrolling online. We can make a microsite and brand it completely to that employer. There's just a ton that we have and a lot of time, effort, and resources we put into voluntary to help make that process easy. And it also helps drive down cost for employers on their employer paid benefits as well. All right. So again, there's a lot to go over when it comes to disability differentiators in the market. Now, when we talk about ancillary benefits, everything that comes next to medical, aside from dental and vision, if we're just focusing on life and disability. Now with life insurance, it's life and disability both. It's common that people might say, oh, well, those are commodities. It's going to be the same regardless of whatever carrier we put it with, right? I'm sure we've all heard that. Maybe some of us have said it before as well. Life insurance, I'm not going to argue with you there. Somebody dies, somebody gets paid a benefit. It's going to be very similar from carrier to carrier with how those contracts work, because that's the base of how that plan functions. Now with disability, there are a lot of provisions and differences that ultimately impact how much a claimant is paid and for how long. Our focus is on helping the claimant. That's really the basis of what it is that we all do. So I am going to go through three major components, how they work with Mutual of Omaha, and then related to how it works in the marketplace, really to help you be a good consultant and be able to have those conversations with your clients and stand out and to help them understand really what it is that they're purchasing for their employees and how it impacts that claimant at the time when they need the money the most. Okay, so the first is no loss, no gain for LTD, which is long-term disability for future hires. This is also referred to as individual continuity of coverage. So when we move a client, an employer, from one carrier to another, and we're just talking long-term disability here, if there are employees who have been covered under the initial carrier for at least a year, and then they transition to a new carrier, that new carrier, every carrier in the marketplace does this, but that new carrier is going to have no loss, no gain, specific to the pre-existing condition limitation for taking over that coverage from another carrier. Meaning those employees that have already been working at that company and covered under that first carrier's long-term disability plan for a year will not have to resatisfy their pre-existing condition period with the new carrier. Now, if that initial carrier stayed in force and they never transitioned to a new carrier, but that employer has a new hire, well, that new hire, of course, is going to be subject to that pre-existing condition limitation, which is 312 in Pennsylvania. I'm assuming most of us on the call are in Pennsylvania. It's the law that it has to be a 312, which means that any condition that somebody had received medical consultation or been prescribed medication in the 3 months prior to their effective date, they cannot file a claim for that specific disability until they've been covered under the plan for at least 12 months, right? So that employer has a new hire, they're going to be subject to that 312 pre-existing condition limitation. But Mutual of Omaha is the only carrier in the marketplace that has a provision to protect against that. And I'm going through a short story as an example of how that works and how much it can impact not only the claimant, but also the employer. I was telling Elise before we started the call, I had these fun little animations built into this presentation so that not everything appears at once and we can sort of go through the slides and add more detail to them. But that function doesn't work, but that's okay. So here's the example. Let's say that there's a tech company, ABC company, and they're growing, they're starting to get much larger, they're having a lot of success, which is great. They're looking to hire a new executive. They find Sally. Sally's been working at her current technical firm for 9 years, and she has group long-term disability coverage with her firm. Well, she has a lot of great experience. This growing company is looking for somebody with good experience to hire that executive. They end up interviewing Sally and they want to hire her. Now, during that interview process, they mentioned to Sally that, hey, you are going to have benefits with us, the same ones that you have with your current employer, and they're going to be effective day one. you are going to have benefits beginning day one when you join our company. She says, okay, I'll join. She accepts. Now, what the employer did not know when they hired Sally, due to HIPAA, these questions, is that Sally was in a car accident within the last month. Now, thankfully, she's okay and she's able to return to work, and her doctor said she can. But the employer doesn't know that she was in a car accident or that she could have lingering effects from that car accident. Now, within the first 12 months of work at her new company, Sally's her back flares up and her neck flares up, and she has to file a long-term disability claim. Now, focusing on the left-hand side here, with every other carrier in the marketplace, she's a new hire. She had an injury within 3 months prior to her effective date or prior to her date of hire with this new employer, and she had a claim within the first 12 months. That's automatically denied because of that pre-existing condition limitation. With Mutual of Omaha, she's a new hire. She already satisfied the pre-existing condition period under her previous employer's group long-term disability policy. She has a claim within the first 12 months, and that's going to be approved. This is an actual example, and the reason why I use this example in the presentation, this is an actual example that we had at Mutual of Omaha where the claim was approved for somebody who had a car accident, they're hired at a new employer, and within the first 12 months, their injuries flared up. So on the left-hand side, the advantages. The employer is not subject to legal liability. So we are focusing on the claimant, and the claimant is going to be paid those benefits at the time when they need them the most. But additionally, let's think about, what did they tell Sally when she was first hired? They said, your benefits are going to begin day one. But it's actually not true because she has the pre-ex. So when she had her claim in the first 12 months, and if they were with any other carrier besides Mutual of Omaha and that claim is denied, well, then she can then take that to court and say, hey, look at my welcome letter. Look at what the correspondence was that my employer gave me when I joined. They said my benefits began day one. Why is this claim being denied? Well, now the employer is subject to that legality and liability and could very well be sued for that. Sorry about that. So with Mutual of Omaha, Okay, so employer is not subject to legal liability. Employee gets benefits at the time they need the money the most. And then you're the hero for bringing them that extra protective disability contract. Back to the employee is, if they had a $10,000 a month benefit and they were disabled for 10 years, that's $1.2 million of benefits that would have been paid out with Mutual, whereas with every other carrier, it would have been denied from the jump and is $0 paid out to that claimant. So sometimes we might look at these benefits and say, oh, well, it's just $3,000 a month or $5,000 a month that they would get. When we say long-term, we mean long-term. I mean, these disabilities can last for years, 2 years, 3 years, 5, 10 years. Remember, I mean, long-term disability can cover somebody all the way up until their Social Security normal retirement age, which is age 67 for anybody born 1960 or later. So that's item 1 of 3. Okay, hopefully that's helpful for you when making your recommendations and having these conversations with clients. If anybody has any questions at any time, please feel free to put them in the chat. I do have that up as well, so I can see those come in. All right. So I started with that one because it is a big differentiator for Mutual of Omaha. We're the only carrier that offers it, but arguably the most important and the most easily recognized by employers is going to be the definition of disability, which is what I'm going to get into next. So a lot of times we might get asked from employees in enrollment meetings or HR managers in proposal presentations, well, yeah, but what qualifies somebody for a disability? Like, if somebody gets into a car accident, is that a disability claim? Will that be approved? Hey, here's X scenario that happened. Is this going to be approved by disability? And that's not something that we can necessarily answer as consultants, because it's all dependent on what the carrier's definition of disability is. And it's not the same across all carriers. So first, let's talk short-term disability. With Mutual of Omaha, that's the definition that's on the screen here. The employee must have at least a 1% loss of earnings, or income, and unable to perform at least one material duty of their own job. Now, own job and own occupation are different. We see those two definitions, and they do not mean the same thing. And we can find that definition in the carrier's contract, usually towards the end, where it explains what that is, but I've put it right here. So own job is a position that an employee is regularly performing as it's actually described by their employer. Own occupation is the job that the employee is regularly performing as it's described in the Dictionary of Occupational Titles from the Department of Labor. So an example to help make this make sense is if there's a company, let's say UPS, that UPS's employee handbook defines that an employee must be able to lift up to 60 pounds in order to be actively working and in order to do their job. Now, let's say this employee is injured and their doctor says, well, you cannot lift more than 50 pounds. Well, based on what their employer requires of them to lift 60 pounds, that employee is disabled under the definition of own job. Well, what if the Department of Labor and their Dictionary of Occupational Titles says that they have to be able to lift up to 30 pounds in order to perform that job? Well, now with the own occupation definition, they are not considered disabled, right? So employer, UPS says you have to be able to lift 60 pounds. Doctor says you can't lift more than 50 pounds. Department of Labor says you can't lift, or in order to do that job, you have to be able to lift at least 30. So they are disabled for the own job definition, but not for the own occupation. Now again, Mutual requires a loss of 1% earnings and one material duty of their own job. The marketplace standard is a loss of between 15 and 20% earnings and a loss of the material duties or some material duties or the majority of the material duties of their own job. That leaves it up to the carrier. That is subjective. And that says, well, okay, but how do we know if they're going to be disabled? And the carrier says, well, we're going to determine if they've lost enough material duties. With Mutual of Omaha, it's objective. We say you need one material duty lost. It's very clear. It's also more lenient than the other carrier's standard of multiple material duties, which again leaves it up to the carrier to determine. And only a 1% loss of earnings, whereas other carriers will require a loss of 15 or 20% earnings in order to qualify. All right, again, I don't like having this much words up at once. It was supposed to come in after each other, but that's all right. We'll start at the top left. For long-term disability now, so that was short-term, now we're in long-term disability. Mutual of Omaha's definition requires a loss of 1% earnings and one material duty of the own occupation. So the only difference there really is that it's own occupation instead of own job. And then, which again is the job that the employee is regularly performing as it's described by the Department of Labor. And that's usually for the first 24 months or the first 2 years where it's an own occupation definition, at which point it would then transition to an any-oc or any occupation definition, which any occupation means any job position that the employee is reasonably suited for based on their experience, knowledge, and education. What we mean by that is we're not going to send a CEO to go flip burgers. All right, they have to be reasonably suited for that job based on their experience, knowledge, and education. During that time, the earnings test also switches to a 15% loss of income instead of a 1% loss of income. And they have to be unable to perform all material duties of any occupation. Something to be mindful of here is a lot of carriers will include gainful occupation language. This is sort of a crystal ball provision where the carrier can say, okay, well, right now in your current state, you are meeting the definition of disability. But because our definition of disability says you are unable to perform the material duties of any gainful occupation, well, we feel that within the next 12 months, you will be able to return to work and earn enough income to no longer meet that definition of disability. So we're actually going to go ahead and end your benefits right now, because in the next 12 months, we don't think you will be disabled anymore. That is not good. So keep an eye out for that gainful occupation language, because that is ultimately what that means. And the definition is spelled out in all of the contracts that include it as well. I do see a question in the chat. Do you do dentist? Not sure what you mean by that. If you can provide just a bit more clarification. We do dental insurance coverage on a group basis, yes, if that's the question that you're asking. Now the market standard. So we require a loss of 1% earnings and 1 material duty. Most carriers in the marketplace require a 20% loss of earnings and some or the majority of the material duties of their own occupation. Again, leaves it up to the carrier and is not as objective and is more restrictive for somebody to actually qualify to receive benefits. And that's during the own occupation period. Then after those first 2 years, usually it's 2 years, when it transitions to the ENEOC period, we require 15% earnings and all material duties, whereas the market standard requires a loss of 40% earnings and all material duties of any occupation. It's a major difference. Do we disability for dentists? A new graduate dentist just finished his residency. We do disability coverage for dentist offices. Specific to individual disability, that would be a different department that I do not work in. Maybe Elise might be able to assist, I'm not certain, but Mutual of Omaha, from my perspective, I'm just speaking specifically to group benefits. All right. So this is the third and final portion of the presentation, which is partial disability. When somebody is hurt or sick and they can't work, but they can work on a part-time basis, which they still are eligible to receive those benefits because they have at least a loss of 1% earnings and 1 material duty, but they're working part-time. We're going to get into a little bit of math here, but this is another one of the top 3 major differences between carriers and contracts and provisions that can help you set yourself apart when making recommendations and sitting down with clients. One of our big differentiators in the marketplace is a protective disability contract. The progressive partial formula, it's not a term that anybody really knows or uses, but that's technically what ours is referred to as, is just referring to how somebody's benefits are paid in the event that they are working part-time and receiving those partial disability benefits. So again, going to go through some math. There's 3 different formulas that carriers can include. This is mostly specific to long-term disability. So for the purposes of this presentation, we're just going to assume long-term disability here. Again, apologies for how much is on the slide already, but let's just focus on, at least it's boxed out. So we're going to look at the top blue box. So if we have a long-term disability plan, 60% to $6,000, pre-disability monthly earnings of our employee in this example is $9,000 a month. They're actively working, they're receiving $9,000 a month. Their monthly benefit, which is 60% of $9,000, is $5,400. So if they go out on long-term disability, they are receiving $5,400 per month. But they're partially disabled, meaning they're working part-time, and from working part-time, they're receiving $3,000 a month instead of $9,000 when they were working full-time. So this first formula is called proportionate loss. The way that we calculate it, step 1, is we subtract the part-time earnings from the pre-disability earnings and then divide that by the pre-disability earnings. That's their percentage of lost earnings, which is 66 2/3. We then multiply that 66 2/3 by their monthly benefit. If they were fully disabled and to receive the full benefit, we are going to calculate their reduced benefit, which is 3,600. So then we add their partial disability benefit of 3,600 to their part-time earnings of 3,000, meaning their full income for the month is $6,600. All right, that's a 73.3% income replacement, which we see on the right-hand side. And if they were disabled and working part-time over 5 years, that's a total amount paid of $396,000. So I'll explain that on the next one. So that's the first formula that can be included. The second one is 50% offset. So it's still going to be a reduced benefit, but the calculation is a bit different. What we would do is take the part-time earnings, so that $3,000 that they're earning from working part-time, times 50%, which is $1,500. We subtract that $1,500 from the monthly benefit of $5,400, and their reduced benefit is $3,900. So now we add that reduced benefit, $3,900, plus their part-time earnings of $3,000, and their total income per month is $6,900. That's a total income replacement of just under 77%, and over 5 years, it's $414,000. So it's similar to the proportionate loss, right? $396,000 over 5 years, 73% income versus $414,000 over 5 years, and a 77% income replacement. And now the final, which is the full work incentive or progressive partial, where we are not going to reduce somebody's partial disability benefit unless their partial disability benefit plus their part-time earnings exceeds 100% of what they were earning before they became disabled. So all we would do is just take their monthly benefit, which is $5,400, add that to their part-time earnings, $3,000, which is $8,400. $8,400 is less than their pre-disability earnings, which was $9,000. So their benefit is actually not going to be reduced at all because they have not reached 100% income replacement. They're at 93.3%, which over 5 years brings them almost $100,000 more of benefits for a total of $504,000. Now, all carriers are going to include this full work incentive benefit for the first 12 months. Sometimes it's for the first 24 months. So a quick example, if we have somebody who has MS and they are doing everything that they can to get back to work, do what's best for themselves and their own health, as well as their employer, and from being the much needed hands on deck that employer needs, they're waking up extra early, they're having a bunch of protein, a big breakfast, they push themselves to get back to work, and then they know that they're going to be tapped out by around noon, maybe a half day. Now, if they continue to do that over 12 months, and then on that first day after 12 months, their benefit is then reduced to either a 50% offset or proportionate loss, which most carriers are going to do. Well, they're going to say, hey, hold on, I'm doing exactly the same thing that I was doing for the last 12 months. Hey, HR manager, how come I'm receiving less of a benefit now? What changed? HR manager says, well, I don't know. You are doing the same. I'm not sure. Let me ask my broker. And then it comes across your desk. And then you have to go to the carrier and say, what's going on here? And say, oh yeah, that's our provision. They're going to say it's standard in the marketplace. It reduces after 12 months. Well, that's not very fair for the claimant, right? From their perspective, they're doing the same thing that they were over 12 months, and now they're receiving less money for it. With Mutual of Omaha, we're going to allow the full work incentive benefit for the entire duration of the claim. We will not reduce it based on proportionate loss or 50% offset after those first 12 months or 24 months. It's the full duration of the claim that they can receive up to 100% of their pre-disability earnings. So this is just a summary slide showing all three together. Proportionate loss, 73% income replacement, almost $400,000 over 5 years. 50% offset is close, it's similar, 77% income replacement and almost $415,000 over 5 years. And then the full work incentive, no reduction in benefit in this specific example, 93% income replacement and just over $500,000 over 5 years. So I hope that this is helpful for you all and that you see how it might be able to help with bringing this to a client and making recommendations and just helping them understand what it is that they are purchasing. But that's the end of the presentation. So I see Elise popped back on, and we'll go ahead and open it up for questions if anybody has any. Thank you for the time.
It is just the dentist question in here. I feel like I heard you start answering it and then more came in and you were on different slides.
I'm not sure what the question is regarding, Elise. Do you know?
I am not fully sure either. Wagdy, maybe you could shoot me an email or shoot Rocco and myself an email and kind of further clarify that if you wanted. So we can answer that offline or something so we can get to exactly what you're wanting. But looking at it, I feel like you're asking if a dentist could get disability coverage. But again, let me know. Shoot me a message. We'll verify that. Outside of that, Rocco, oh, he said yes. That is what he's saying.
Yes. So we do group benefits. So if it's a dentist office, we can provide disability coverage. Yes. If it's an individual dentist, it's possible. Yes, but we do not in our department at Mutual of Omaha offer the individual coverage. It's just group coverage.
If you're looking for that, Wagdy, shoot, like I said, let me know and I can get you to somebody internally here that could help you out on the individual route. It's not me, it's not Rocco, but I have somebody for you. But I mean, that being said, thank you for this. Per usual, Rocco, you're always wonderful. It's always informative. I hope everybody got something out of this. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Elise. Yeah, thank you to you as well and all that joined.
Oh, see, we're a GA. Wagdy, I'll shoot you a message, okay? So that we can go over what we can do here at URL to help you. But yeah, I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Thanks, Elise. Yeah, thanks all for joining.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.